Hey guys, we're going to see how this works. Since we can't be in school and I can't actually teach you the material, I'm going to go through these slides, and I'll also give you tips and tricks and probably some announcements through here, so you're going to have to watch these. Our new notes, the way we do our notes now, the notes are required. The written notes are required. And at the end of the notes, you're going to see a signature page. Okay, the signature page says that your parents have signed off that yes, the notes are all the way filled out and that you have reread the notes so that you can understand it. All right, so here's my thoughts. The plain PowerPoint, just the one straight off the web page with nothing else on it, you can use that to fill out the blanks in your notes. Then when it's time to reread the notes, if you use this one right here that I'm making right now, you can read the notes and I can teach it to you at the same time. So this way you'll also help to understand the stuff, because we'll still have tests. All right, we'll still have, I know if we keep doing this thing at home, we'll have tests. We'll have to figure them out. We'll have to do other things. But I think you guys are doing pretty well. If you do know of anybody who has not yet signed up, see if you can get hold of them and get them to sign up. All right, but let's start with this. This is Chapter 6, Section 1. This is biomes. All right, so Section 1 is all about what is a biome. All right, so starting off, what is a biome? A biome is a very large region. It's not just a neighborhood, not just a small ecosystem. It's huge, huge ecosystems that are characterized by a specific type of climate, the same temperature, general stuff throughout, and certain types of plants and animal communities. All the way through this area, you have the same type of plants and the same type of animals. This is what binds it together, making a biome. The climate and geography. Geography means how the land is shaped, whether it's flat, whether it has mountains. That's what geography is. So the climate and geography of a region determines what type of biome can exist there. Meaning, see these mountains, okay? Mountains are cold, so different types of plants can live there than could live at a flat area like a desert. So it depends. Every biome is made up of many individual ecosystems. So the ecosystems are smaller, the biome is bigger. So the communities, remember communities is the living things. The communities, the living animals, plants, stuff, only living. The communities within the biome have adapted to the small differences in climate and the environment within the biome. So the animals and plants that live there are adapted to the conditions within the biome. And the major biomes, especially the ones we're going to study, deserts, forests, grasslands, tundra, several types of aquatic environments. The aquatic we're going to pick up in Chapter 7. Chapter 6 is just land. So more on the biomes. So all of the living things are closely related to their environment. You know that every animal is adapted specifically to their environment so that they can survive through there. So any change in one part of the environment, like an increase or decrease of a species of an animal or plant, now do not forget the plants, is going to cause a ripple effect in the change of the other parts of the environment. If you change one part, especially one of the important parts, we call these keystone species. If you change something within the ecosystem, you know that that's going to have ripple effects like to change the rest of it. So we need to remember that every organism depends in some way on the other living and non-living things around it. So you change one, the whole thing's going to get changed. All right. So to understand a world biome, you have to know the following. Okay, it's like a list. All right, first, you need to know what the climate of that region is like. Second, you need to know where every biome is found and what its geography is like. Remember, geography is hills or mountains. Third, you need to know the special adaptations of the vegetation. How are they adapted to live in that place? And fourth, the types of animals that are found in that biome and their physical and behavioral adaptations to the environment. The plants are adapted to the environment, but so are the animals. That's 3 and 4. Okay, so these are the 4 things you need to know to understand a biome. Sounds like a list on a test, doesn't it? There are 4 things. First, the climate. All right. Second, where they're found and the geography. Third, the special adaptations of the plants. And fourth, the special adaptations of the animals. Okay? And we have a table that we're going to fill out as we go through in section 2 and in section 3. We have a table that we're going to fill out that discusses each of these things in the different biomes. I'll show you about that probably when we start section 2. The biomes and vegetation. So the biomes are described by their vegetation because the plants that grow in an area will determine the other organisms that can live there. Several of our videos that we watch all the time, Boozman and Crash Course, which you're going to get a lot of, Boozman and Crash Course, they both say plants are king. That's what they say all the time because the plants determine what else can live there. So it's plants are kings. They determine what animals are going to show up. So the plants in a particular biome will have characteristics and specialized structures or adaptations that will allow them to survive in that biome. Think about how a pine tree is adapted to live in a really cold tundra place, taiga place, okay, really cold forest. Pine tree living in the cold forest. Compare that to a cactus that lives in a desert. Think about it. Those 2 plants are specifically adapted to their biomes. Okay, that's how it works. These adaptations will include size and shape and color, those easy things. Like the plants in the tundra have to be very short because they can't get enough water to get any larger. Oh, and see this right here where my camera is in front of the words? I can't move the camera. All right, it's just going to be there. So this is why you fill out the blanks before you start watching the videos, just in case you miss something behind the video. Okay. All right, so anyway, back to this. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about how the plants on the tundra have to be really short because the wind it's so cold and it cuts across the top, and those plants, they can't be any taller than that. All right, but anyway, we'll talk about the tundra. All right, so these are the major biomes we're going to cover. We'll get all of these, except we won't cover mountains by themselves necessarily or the polar ice by themselves. But we'll cover all the rest of them in this chapter. And this map, although it's fuzzy here, you have another map that I've added to your notes. And when you check the PDF of your book, when you actually read through the book, you'll see the map more clearly. There's also a project we're going to do. I told you a minute ago about the list where we're going to put the different characteristics of each biome. There's a map where you're going to color in the different biomes as we go through. All right, but we'll cover that some more, like I said, as we start section 2. I'll go over some good detail on how that's going to work. All right, so biomes and climate. Climate, if you recall, and I'm sure you do, climate is the average weather conditions in an area over a very long period of time. Where weather is just a couple of days, climate is the long-term weather. And so climate is the main factor in determining which plants can grow there. Think about it. Climate of the desert is different than the climate of the mountains, which is different than the climate of the tropical rainforest. And so because of those things, you're going to have different plants that live there. So the climate is the main factor to determine which plants can grow there. And as we said, plants will determine what biome you have. So plants are king. So climate determines which plants, and then the plants determine which biome. The temperature and precipitation are the 2 most important factors that's going to determine the climate. Think about it, how hot it is and how much rain you get. Desert and tropical rainforest, they're both very, very hot, but one gets water and one doesn't. So that's going to determine the climate, which in turn will determine the plants, which in turn determines the biome. They're kind of a step together thing. All right, so temperature and precipitation. There are 2 main things that will determine a biome, temperature and precipitation. And I will ask you several times, what are the 2 main things that determine a biome? And you'll tell me temperature and precipitation. All right, so most organisms are adapted to live within a particular range of temperatures and will not survive too far or above or below that range. Think about big pine trees in the mountains where it's cold. Those big pine trees have to have it cold. If it gets too hot, they're going to die. But then think about the cactuses in the desert. They have to have it hot. So if it turns cold, they die. So there's a specific range of temperature that all of the plants can live. And then precipitation or rain also is going to limit the organisms that can be found there, because all organisms need water. Plants and animals both. Everything needs water. And the bigger the organism, it says bigger the animal. Think about elephants and stuff, but also bigger the tree. The bigger the organism at all, the more water it's going to have. So if you have a place that's very, very dry, the plants and the animals can get big. There's not enough water. So the bigger the organism, the more water it needs. Okay, so what are the two things that determine a biome? Temperature and precipitation. Good. So the biomes that do not receive enough rainfall to support the large trees are going to be dominated by small trees, shrubs, and grasses. So again, the plant determines the biome, and the climate determines the plant. So if there's not a lot of rain, you're not going to get big plants around. You're only going to get small trees, shrubs, and grasses. In the biome where the rainfall is not frequent at all, the vegetation is mostly going to get cactus and shrubs. So if you have even less, so first, if you don't get much, you get small trees, shrubs, and grasses. If you get even less, you're going to get cactus and desert shrubs. And even less than that, lack of rainfall altogether, this would mean no plants, no matter what the temperature is. Whether it's too hot, too cold, that doesn't matter. If you don't have enough water, you got nothing. And that's where you have the deserts that are just sand. The higher the temperature and precipitation, if you get both of them together really high, you get really tall and really thick vegetation. Plants everywhere. Think about tropical rainforest, right? High temperature, high rain, lots and lots of plants. That's their favorite thing. All right, now this part, latitude and altitude. All right, latitude and altitude. Okay. Remember first remember when you were learning geography, you have a picture of a world, okay? You have lines that cut it this way on the picture of the Earth, and then lines that cut it this way. Okay, if this is the equator right here, okay? This is the equator. You have lines that cut it this way, okay? That would be the ones that give us our time zones. That's longitude, okay? But if this is the equator, you have lines that cut it this way, going back and forth around the equator. This is latitude. These are the ones that are going to be important for climate, not longitude. Longitude is not going to do us any good at all. Latitude. So that's the ones that tells us how high or low we are compared to the equator. Okay, going towards the poles in either direction. So that's latitude. Altitude, of course, is how high up a mountain you are, or if you're driving an airplane or a spaceship, how high you are in space. But altitude is how high up you are. Okay, so latitude is the distance north and south of the equator, and we express it in degrees. Like here where we live is about 65 degrees north of the equator, and that tells us about where we are. And altitude is, of course, the height of an object above a reference point, usually sea level. We measure things on Earth about how high it is compared to sea level. So the mountains in eastern Tennessee have less altitude, they're shorter mountains, than the ones in the Himalayas in India, right? So altitude is how high you are above sea level. And then climate, of course, is going to vary with latitude and altitude. That's what changes the different biomes. How far you are from the equator or how high up a mountain you are. I've got some pictures I'm going to show you in just a second for that. The climate gets colder as the latitude and the altitude will increase. Either one of those, you're going to get colder, which is why you get colder the further up a mountain you move. There's my picture. Oh, my face is in the way again. Like I said, but you've got one in your notes. Okay, so this picture here is a diagram that shows you this is the hottest on the bottom. Getting up here at the top is cold. Now, over here, this is the wettest. Going over here to where we can't see, my face is in the way, the driest. All right, so this shows us our biomes with respect to temperature and precipitation. So what are the two main things that affect the biome? Temperature and precipitation. All right, so the very hottest and wettest of the biomes, you know that is the tropical rainforest. Okay, so if you stay down here where it's hot, but you start getting drier as you go across, you go into the savanna, and then you go into the deserts. Okay, these are all still hot. Okay, you go up here where it's a little cooler. Okay, this is kind of mid-level. All right, and you still get plenty of water though. This is temperate forest right here in the middle. That's where we live, our biome here in Memphis. Okay, so this is temperate forest. You get a little drier from here. That's temperate grassland. That's like the prairies. Okay, think about it, the prairies. All right, and then you go further there, you're at desert again. You go up here a little colder, but still plenty of water. Okay, you've got the taiga all the way across. Okay, taiga here, and then subarctic. Okay, that means it's a little, this shows us where we are compared to the poles. Okay, so you've actually got taiga all the way across here. And what we're going to learn is that really the biggest biome of all is the taiga. We'll learn that in this lesson. Okay. And then the last one, when you are still very, very cold, but you've run out of water altogether, that's the Arctic. It's too cold for trees to grow. And even if you had water, it's frozen at this point. You can't grow trees in the tundra. All right, latitude and altitude. Okay, so as latitude and altitude increase, the biomes are going to change. We said on the 2 slides ago that latitude, how far above or below the equator you are, is going to determine which biome you have, or as you're climbing up a mountain, that will determine which biome you have, climbing up the mountain. The trees of the tropical rainforest will usually go closer to the equator. Think about it. Every time you think about tropical rainforest, it's going to be near the equator. While mosses and lichen of the tundra, think about tundra, that's going to be near the poles, the top and the bottom of the earth. The temperate region, which that means in the middle, the temperate region includes biomes like temperate forests and grasslands. The forest is what we have here, the temperate forest. And then the grassland, that's the prairies. Think about buffaloes and prairie dogs and, you know, the Native Americans a long time ago when they were riding on their horses. Those are the prairies. All right, so which usually have moderate temperatures, meaning in the middle, very fertile soil. And when we get to grasslands, I'll tell you why it's so fertile. We really have very fertile soil here. And that's ideal for agriculture. If you think about where all the big factory farms are, they're right here in the temperate zones where we are. All right, and so for our last slide in section 1, we got a quick little review of how this works, okay? So if we pretend that this is the equator down here, I've got an equator, an E for equator, and you go all the way up this way, and again, you can't see behind my head, but let's put a P up here for poles. So let's assume this way, going sideways, tip the Earth on its side. Okay, all right, so we go from the equator down here to the poles up at the top. And if you look down at this corner, we've got the tropical rainforest, okay? Moving towards the poles, we've got the deciduous forest like we have right here, okay? And then moving here into the taiga, and then the tundra, and then the polar ice, all right? But you have the exact same thing as you go up a mountain. So latitude and altitude. So as you go up a mountain, you're going to see the same thing where you start here with the tropical rainforest, move up here into the deciduous forest, higher up into the taiga, and then tundra here right at the end, and then above the tree line you've got nothing but polar ice. Well, it's not polar ice, it's mountain ice, but it's just ice at the top. So it shows you that whether you're moving from, moving up the equator or up a mountain, either way, the steps and steps of the biome are going to show the same progression. All right, so that's section 1. So we'll have another video in just a second for section 2. All right, bye. See you in a minute, guys.